Well, the Productivity Commission did look at rural R&D in the last couple of years. It's had several looks at R&D, and in the nature of the Productivity Commission, they always make recommendations that are about efficiencies. And one of the significant recommendations that was made at the most recent report was to basically cut the level of funding to R&D. The government has responded to that particular recommendation by saying that they were not proposing to look at cutting the dollar for dollar matching for R&D, so they were going to leave the current funding arrangements as they are. There are a lot of other recommendations that the Productivity Commission made, however, and the government is still considering those recommendations in conjunction with the recommendations of the National R&D Council, which handed down its recommendations around the same time as the Productivity Commission. So the government is looking at both of those sets of recommendations together and has been consulting with industry and R&D agencies to come up with a final set of recommendations themselves about what the future of R&D might be.
Now, I know you can't reflect on what the mood might be within the R&D industry, but what you've just described is a kind of bureaucratic nightmare, it seems to me, at a time when we need clarity and we need transparency and we need a sense of purpose. Please respond.
Well, as a bureaucrat of 20-something years standing, I wouldn't refer to it as a bureaucratic nightmare, but I would say that there are a lot of people out there that are looking for some clarity about what happens in the future, because as we have been hearing today at this conference, there is a growing demand for food production. If we're going to meet the demands of 9 billion people, and some people recommend that we need to be doubling or even more than doubling our production in the next 50 years or so, then the basis of that has got to be R&D. So we in the R&D world are looking for some guidance and some clear air in terms of moving forward with what we might be doing to help R&D and to help increase productivity. And there are lots and lots of issues that need to be looked at there, which go to not only increasing the production per hectare, but also addressing some of the problems that we've got of reducing acreage, of loss of soil, of urbanisation, and the increasing demand from consumers for greater environmental protection, for protection of the rivers, all of those sort of things. So at one end of the spectrum you've got a lot of challenges for production, but you've got a clear growth in demand of food coming up over the next 50 years. And the history shows us that public investment in an R&D is the best way of increasing productivity. So there are plenty of people who are out there wanting to know what's going to happen in the future, there's no doubt about that.
What strikes me, though, is that what we're lacking today in the whole conversation is this sense of urgency. Now, Julian Cribb will scare the daylights out of us and say we've got tipping points in water, fertiliser, soil disappearing, energy. Is there a real sense of urgency inspiring your sector today, do you think, the R&D sector?
Well, I listen to a lot of those claims of doom and gloom and reflect that there's been claims of doom and gloom around since the 1967 Club of Rome report, and there have been times since then when we've been producing so much food that we've got to subsidise it and then even dump it, and so I am confident that we can meet the challenges. I don't see that the challenges are insurmountable, but we do need to have our act together, and we do need some clarity around some of the bigger decisions, if you like, so that we can meet those challenges.
So finally, Craig, I get around among some top-end primary producers in Australia across a range of farming sectors, and there's always great concern expressed by those individuals about what they see as the parlous state of R&D in Australia, under threat from Productivity Commission, etc. Do you feel that Rirc, for example, gets enough actual support rather than token support from the farm sector? Is there more that farmers themselves and their organisations could do?
I disagree with it being a parlous state. Of course, any agency that invests in R&D as we do would gratefully receive more funds. But what we do is we try and target our funds to where it most usefully can be used. Now, our mandate is not the big industries like wheat and beef and dairy, for example. We focus on small industries. And what we've been talking about at this conference here today is the opportunities for small industries. And they might not be the big industries that meet that calorie challenge that we've been talking about on a global scale. But in terms of regional economies, these industries can be really important. So if you look at the tropical fruit people on the Atherton tableland, or you look at some of the smaller people like the wildflower producers and those sort of things, they mightn't be big on a national or a global scale, but they can be hellishly important for a local area. And so what we do is try and look at how they can capitalise on those opportunities and what's the right path for them. Is the path for them in small local markets, or is it in the big supermarket chains? And so what we want to do is ensure that these people who are enthusiastic and trying to explore new opportunities, that they can capitalise on those opportunities that are there.
So then what I'm hearing from you perhaps is your response is that in the smaller farm sector there is support for Rirc and its work and the whole R&D challenge?
Yeah, I reckon there's a high degree of positivity amongst these small industries, and we really try and work with them to produce what they need. If you look at the crocodile industry, for example, they are really enhancing their productivity through not a big spend on R&D. They, of course, would like to spend more on R&D, but with the limited funds we have, we can work with the individual producers, because there are not a lot of them, to target our research to exactly what they want. If you look at a couple of the bigger industries that we deal with, the rice industry and the chicken meat industry, the chicken meat industry has responded to the huge growth in demand for chicken in Australia, and there's not a lot of competition from foreign markets, so they've been able to meet that growing demand, and they've done it based on R&D.